So welcome. Thank you for joining us today and investing your valuable time. I want all of you to congratulate yourselves for showing up and keeping that commitment that you make to you every day to be the best leader or manager that you can be. So one of my philosophies is every day is a new opportunity to get better, and every challenge is an opportunity to improve yourself and your team. So this is the first of our monthly webinar series that we kick off every fall to support you in achieving the team success and your personal success that you are charged with as a manager or leader. So Marie and I are very excited today to share our experience and wisdom in working with the leaders and teams for over 14 years as part of Compass Workforce Solutions. Our entire team also brings to the table over 100 years of workings with leaders and teams across many industries and our collective wisdom and experience. So a couple of housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded. So if you registered, you will receive a full recording of today's webinar. Towards the end of the webinar, we do have a special offer for you where we are going to continue to support your success between now and our next webinar in October. Please don't keep us a secret. So when you get our webinar invites, feel free to share them with those people in your personal and professional lives where you think we could add value and help them achieve their plans and their success. And towards the end of the presentation, we're also going to ask for your help and your support. And we're going to give you a QR code to be able to leave a review and share some feedback from what you found on today's webinar. So I'm Christine Ippolito. I'm the founder and principal of Compass Workforce Solutions. I'm very thrilled that you're spending time with us here today. I'm going to share a little bit about myself, just so that you have some perspective if you don't know who I am or you've never spent time with us. Compass has been around since 2009, and we are certified predictive index talent optimization specialists. So this is a tool that we've been using for the last 5 years to empower us and our teams and our clients' teams to be much more successful. I have a lot of business experience under my belt. I've participated in leadership and different development programs and have been recognized as a top woman in business in the Long Island business community. I'm also a graduate with a master's in management from North Park University. But one of the things I think I'm also most proud of is my little rescue chihuahua, Little P. So we've come a long way in the last 4 years, and he's really helped to teach me a lot about how do you connect with someone who's a little bit broken, a little bit damaged, and doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. So Marie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Christine. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. My name is Marie Mareno. I am an HR generalist here at Compass. Like Christine, I'm also certified in the predictive index, and I am HR certified through SHRM. And I also facilitate the SHRM certification committee. I have a bachelor's from Post University. And just a little bit more about me that's kind of unique. When I am not doing HR and solving these complex people-related issues, I like to spend a lot of time with my husband and my dog. So you could see that's little Harrison up in the corner. And I also like to go to Disney a lot. So I'm a really big Disney fan. So when I need that escape from being an adult, I like to spend a little bit of time down in the parks in Florida. All right, so today's session is going to be focused on a few key areas that we're going to dive into. So the first is on setting clear performance expectations and goals. So we're going to review the importance of setting actionable goals for your employees. And then we're going to provide some strategies for communicating performance expectations to your team members. We're also going to dive into delivering effective feedback and communication. So we'll explore some techniques for delivering feedback that's constructive and encourages growth and development. And then we're going to talk about how to facilitate open and honest communication between managers and team members, as well as identifying some tools to support these strategies and these conversations. And then lastly, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into performance assessment and measurement. So we'll review some methods for assessing and measuring employee performance that's objective and fair. And then we'll review the pros and cons of the different performance assessment approaches. So we'd like to start out with a quick poll. So you can either scan the QR code that's in the top left corner, or you can go to slido.com and enter that number. But we'd like to hear from everyone, how often does your organization conduct performance evaluations? Feel free to be honest. It's totally anonymous. We don't know who says what. All right, so it looks like, and I know results are still coming in, the large majority are conducting them on an annual basis. And then we're kind of split between never, as needed, and other. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get into how to develop a policy and a procedure. So we wanted to start out with this quote here, and this is from Wayne Dyer, if anyone's familiar with him. The quote is, "Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible." So before we can even evaluate an employee's performance, we really need to make sure that as managers, we're communicating these expectations and our goals to the employee. So how can an employee be successful if they don't know what success looks like? A lot of times managers have these ideas, these visions, especially our higher level leaders, of what that goal is, what it looks like for the employee to be successful. But unless we set that goal and communicate that expectation, it will be very difficult to achieve that desired outcome. So let's dive a little bit more into how to set expectations. So first, the reason why we set expectations is because it helps employees better understand what the company goals are, and it helps them work to be more effective in what they're doing. Without those expectations outlined from the beginning, you run a big risk of miscommunication and low employee engagement. A lot of times we see managers come to us and they have a new hire, they've been there for 90 days. This person isn't working out. They're not successful in this job. I don't think we should continue working with them. And we look at, what has that communication been like? Have you set expectations with them? Are they clear on what they should be doing? So it's very important that we're setting expectations early. And this starts really in the pre-hiring phase. So when you're creating that job posting, you're setting expectations right there when you're outlining what this person's responsibilities are. It also occurs in the interviewing phase when you're sharing with candidates what success looks like in the role and you're painting that picture for them. It's also important to emphasize objectives. So what's the purpose of the company or the department? And how does that employee's role contribute to the purpose? And what are their main objectives? So they need to understand that bigger picture in order to see how they can create value and bring meaning to their work. And then we also talk about communicating behaviors. So not only the tasks that someone needs to complete, but the behaviors that'll make them successful in the role. So for example, will this person need to be collaborative and ask for input from others when they're communicating and completing their work? Will they need to be more direct or practice active listening, listen to others without judgment? And then we talk about being clear and direct in communication. So this is extremely important because a lot of times employees are confused as to what they should be doing. And then the manager will tell us, but I told them about that. So it's important as a manager that you're being clear, you're being very specific. And the best way to ensure that the employee understands is to ask them to repeat it back to you. So after you have that conversation with them, ask them, okay, based on what you heard, what is expected of you? What are your next steps and what should you be doing? And then we need to discuss these expectations often. So if you tell them once, it's very unlikely that it's really going to sink in. They need to be top of mind. And that goes for the overall goals and the objectives as well.
I think we've all heard the quote, failure to plan is planning to fail, right? It's attributed to Benjamin Franklin. But yet, I think one of the biggest challenges that we see is people feel like they don't have time to plan. They don't have time to think. They don't have time to put goals and objectives together. So this is probably the most important investment of your time that you're going to make, because in business, when we struggle with how many tasks are constantly looking for our attention and grabbing our attention and the noise of every day and the fires that we put out, if we don't know what's a priority and what's irrelevant, we don't know how to spend our time. So when we look at creating specific goals, helping that employee to understand to the point that you're creating a visual picture of success. What does success look like? What does it feel like? And what does it mean for them? And what does it mean for the team and the company? So specifically, what is it that needs to be accomplished? Where is it going to happen? And how is this going to take place? Now, if you're one of our clients that's using Predictive Index, you really understand how to document this for your person, right? A lot of people need very specific and clear outlines in detail on a document. What does success look like? We always advise that everything be somehow documented or written down, but creating goals for someone doesn't need to be a complicated template or procedure. It can be as easy as a piece of blank paper that you work through with them together. So don't let the form and the format hold you back or stop you from doing this step. Measurable. How do we know when we've achieved success? So a lot of times you'll see an employee and a supervisor arguing about performance. So to quantify success, right? So we both know when it's been achieved or reached, use a milestone or a measure. Should it be a percentage better than it is now? Are there certain numbers that we need to achieve? Is there a turnaround time? So success means all emails are responded to within 24 hours. Like, what is timely? What does timely mean? And what is the benchmark for your organization or your company? Is it days, hours, weeks? So give people a sense what that looks like. And then the other thing that you may need to do is some goals might be year-long goals. Break it down in steps so that the employee can understand, if I'm not to point one in 90 days, the likelihood of me achieving this goal over 12 months is not probable. So that there's constant movement every week, every month towards achieving that goal and taking down small pieces of reaching it. Is the goal attainable? Does the person have the responsibility and the authority in the organization to impact that change or activity? Do they have the tools? Do they have access to the software? Do they know how to use the software? So when we set a goal for someone, we want to make sure that it's challenging, but it's not unattainable. So what are the obstacles for success? Let's identify those up front. Let's make sure that we're removing the obstacles. Let's make sure that the password works, that the login works, that everything that they need access to is set up for them, and that the resources they need, whether it's time or a budget, is given to that person to allow them to do it. Relevancy. People need to understand, how does this fit into the big picture? How does it impact me as an employee? How does it benefit me? How does it benefit my team and the company or the organization as a whole? What are we trying to achieve, and why is this important? So if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, right, and his concept is always start with why. Why is this a goal? Why are we spending time here? Because if I understand that, I'm going to be motivated and more likely to buy in to creating the success with everyone else. And then time. What is a realistic deadline? So everybody has their regular job responsibilities. And on top of those are often these goals or these projects that we're working on to move things forward. So be realistic with the amount of time and effort that the day-to-day needs to take, and then realistic with the time investment that it's going to take to achieve that particular goal. So what are some of the benefits of setting SMART goals? So when you have SMART goals, first of all, it creates benefits for the company and for the team. Everybody knows, what does it mean to be successful? If I understand success and I buy into success, I'm going to work towards success. SMART goals also stretch people. So a lot of employees are motivated by a little bit of a challenge, by a learning opportunity, by a stretch. Do you know what your person's internal motivators are? Is it learning something new? Is it being part of a team? Is it competing a little bit against themselves? Can I sell more than I sold last year? Can I have a better margin on this project than I had last year? What gets them going? So index gives you that insight to know, how do you align the goal with someone's internal motivators? We also want to measure results, right? Everybody likes results. So effort and energy is great, but if we're not achieving a result, if we're not achieving a benefit to the organization, we're really just going through the motions and doing activity. And achieving a result builds confidence in the employee. Now they feel like they have capability, they have confidence, they can move forward, they're growing with the organization, you're keeping them interested. So those are some of the benefits of SMART goals. What does that look like? So if we're going to write a SMART goal, what does it actually look like in practice? So we're sharing with you on the ineffective side some of the actual goals that we've seen on performance evaluations. These have a tendency to be demotivating because they're really vague. They're not clearly defined. There's no time. And there's not a specificity of what is the measurable result. So for example, if I'm an employee that's told I need to learn shipping, well, what does that mean? I need to learn the process. I need to be able to pack the boxes, make the labels. I need to be able to communicate with FedEx or DHL. What does it mean to, quote, learn shipping? And how do I demonstrate the mastery of that knowledge? What does that look like? Is my supervisor going to walk me through and watch me go through an entire shipping process? Am I going to have the ability to teach a new hire or a colleague the shipping process? So define success. So effective goals, right? Again, if we go back to our SMART goal methodology, S is for specific. So by the end of Q2, 5 people will work on increasing the customer satisfaction score. Measurable, we're going from 70% to 90%. And we're getting 5 positive customer reviews on G2, our review platform. How is this attainable? We're putting together short surveys for our customers to understand what their problems and issues are, and we're going to resolve any negative issues in a timely manner. So what is timely for this client? Is it 24 hours? Is it a day? Is it a complicated service issue? Does it take a week? Make sure that they understand that. But when you give people this type of a goal, everybody knows what to do. There's 5 of us. We're working together. We have until the end of this quarter to get this done. We're going from 70% to 90%. So we should understand the difference. How many people is it going to take to shift our score? And clearly getting 5 positive customer reviews is very clearly defined. So they know they have to ask for those reviews, right? They have to get people to share that very specific feedback. So giving impactful feedback and delivering impactful feedback. Feedback is sharing with someone how their behavior is either helping them or hurting them, what's going well, what's not going well, what we should be doing more of, what we should be doing less of. A lot of managers and supervisors shy away from giving feedback, and they hope that the person will figure it out. But if you respect your employees, if you value your employees, you're going to give positive feedback as well as negative feedback, right? So you might remember in the beginning when I said I learned a lot from having a rescue animal of how to get behavior to move in the right direction and how to build trust. The more positive feedback you give to that person, so I call it catching people doing things right, rewarding the positive behavior, they're going to notice that you care about them. So when you're only identifying negative behaviors, people start to lose confidence, they start to lose trust, they start to wonder, do you value them? Are you interested in them showing up every day? So make sure that there's a balance. Because even people that are doing a poor job, if they're still there, they've got to be doing a certain amount of things correctly. So start with the positive and then let them know how much they can improve by making some minor tweaks and adjustments. And think about this in the same way that you would give feedback to someone in your life that you love and that you care about. So people at work are really no different than our significant others, than our children, than our families, right? You have to be in a good centered place to give positive feedback. And give people feedback in a way that it resonates with them, right? So capture the situation and give specific feedback. And the closer to the incident you can give the feedback, the more valuable it becomes. So try to find something every day that one of your employees did right and did correctly and recognize it and thank them and acknowledge them and be specific. I really liked the way you had a conversation today with that customer. That person was very agitated, but you calmed them down. And by the end of the conversation, you had resolved the issue and you did a great job. When you start to do that and you're specific, people automatically know, what do I do more of? What do I do less of? Okay. Sometimes you might need to do an after action report. If you see an employee get into an argument with a coworker or a colleague, oftentimes it's a good idea to say, all right, so that didn't seem to go well, and you didn't seem to be able to resolve the issue. How could we have handled that a little bit differently? What are some thoughts or some brainstorming that you have? What type of communication style does the person have that you were dealing with? Are they a little bit more introverted? Do they need more privacy? Do they need an email heads up about what you want to talk about first? So debrief. But make sure that they have actionable steps. how can I move forward in a different, better way? And what does that look like so they can take action and they have some tools to be able to do that? And sometimes, no matter how hard we try or prepare or think through the feedback that we're going to give, it can be slightly demotivating to people. So encourage them, remind them, I know you can do this. I see this in you. You have positive attributes, whatever those are. You're a great problem solver. Don't let this small obstacle hold you back. And then remember, think about who they are. How much structure do they need? How much repetition do they need? Should you role play with them before this comes up again? Is that helpful? You know, are they a lower level employee where a little bit more hand holding would be helpful? Or are they a peer where sharing your experience might just be enough to be able to move them forward? I think the other thing that we see a lot of is managers can very easily get sucked into spending 80% of their time with the one or two people who are the most challenging and trying to change those people in a way that might not be attainable. Think about who on your team, if you invested time with, could really move forward in the organization. Who is doing well, but with an investment of time and feedback and constructive goals could really rise. You should be spending 80% of your time and investment on people that have a learning mindset, that are curious, that you have a strong relationship and connection to, that like the organization and that are engaged, because they're the ones that are going to move the organization forward. It's much easier to teach a skill or how to use a computer or train someone on Excel than it is to try to get an employee to be more cooperative, more helpful, or to have a better attitude. So one of the baseline requirements we have at Compass, which makes it very easy for us to decide who's on the team and who's off, is, are you happy, friendly, and helpful? I shouldn't have to teach you how to do those things. Marie shouldn't have to teach you how to do those things. Those are the things that we all bring to the table. And that's the baseline of where we should be. So keep that in mind and really think about who are the one or two people on your team that if you invested another 2 hours a week in them, where could they go? What could they achieve? And how would that move the organization forward? And if you're a predictive index client, you've got your management strategy guide for every single one of your employees. Use this guide, refer to it, reach out to us to get help on it, to say, how do I use this to deliver more meaningful, impactful feedback for this particular person so I can support their success? All right, Marie, take it away.
So let's jump into another quick poll. So this was just an open-ended question. So again, you can either use the QR code in the top left, or you can join at slido.com and enter that number. But we'd like you to share, when is the last time that you received effective feedback? So feedback that was really valuable to you, you were able to take action on, it was specific and it was motivating. And if you're a business owner, maybe it was a time that you received feedback from a subordinate, or maybe it was the last time that you gave effective feedback. And again, this is anonymous, so feel free to share. I see a couple of years ago, that's completely fair. This week, yesterday, 1 month ago, last month. few years ago. That one's coming up a few times.
So it looks like it's all over the map. Some people
Yeah.
every day, some people a couple years.
Someone in the chat said today.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are all over the map. So we can see that, there are a lot of differences here.
And there's a lot of opportunities. The more you make it a habit to give feedback to your team, the more feedback you're probably going to get from them. So start with something positive. Start with catching people doing things right, acknowledging what's going well. And quite honestly, you might want to have that little voice at the end of the day to give yourself a positive pat on the back. What did you do today that moved you forward? What did you do today that's going to make you and your team more successful? Because you should be able to identify 1 to 3 things every day where you're moving towards success and you're identifying your wins.
Definitely. And something that we've been doing at Compass for the last few months that's just been extremely impactful and uplifting is at the end of the day, we are each taking a little bit of time and reflecting on what are those 1 or 2 things, and then we're sharing them with each other. And then we're celebrating each other and working towards creating that positive environment. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about performance assessment and measurement. So I kind of want to just start out by detailing the purpose of assessing employee performance and conducting performance evaluations. So there are a few reasons why we do this. So the first reason is to assess an individual's current job performance. How are they doing in that role? Where are they falling short? What training do they need? Where are there areas for development, and how can we support them? We also use this to provide a basis for making pay decisions and for promotion decisions. So who is ready to be promoted in the next coming year? Who can we move to that next level? So before implementing a performance evaluation process, you need to really take some time and invest into developing a policy and procedure that works best for your organization, your team, and what your overall strategy and mission are. So you'll take the time and first establish the criteria that employees will be evaluated against and what is the desired outcome of the evaluation. So this criteria should be objective, and it should relate to their job description and the functions of the role. And it should also relate to the company's values and objectives. So for example, if you have a sales representative, they might be evaluated against their sales volume or the amount of customer complaints that they've resolved. So once you determine what that criteria is, you then want to look at which type of performance evaluation system is going to be most effective for you. And there are a few different types that are in common use, and we'll touch on those in the next slide. And then we did talk about this a little bit earlier, but what is going to be the timeline for which employees will be evaluated? Is it going to be annually? So will it all be at one time during the year, or will you do them near an employee's anniversary date? A lot of companies have also found success evaluating employees twice a year or even quarterly and having quarterly check-ins. A large amount of feedback that we hear is often that employees and managers can't remember what happened a year ago. So increasing the communication makes that easier. And then lastly, training management on how to evaluate employees and conduct those conversations. So these evaluations are a critical part of a manager's role. So it's important that managers are properly trained and that they understand how to evaluate employees in a fair and objective way and how to conduct that conversation. So some best practices really include providing that continuous feedback throughout the year. So this way, when you get to that conversation, nothing is a surprise. The employee is already aware of where they're doing well and where they might need to improve. So it's really important that you understand that the performance evaluation isn't replacing daily coaching and ongoing feedback. It's more of a formal structure to sit down and have that conversation and document performance. So there are several methods that are commonly used to assess an employee's performance. Each method has their own advantages and their own disadvantages. So for the sake of our hour-long session, we're really just going to touch on the three more common ones that we see. The first one is called 360-degree feedback. And in this system, you collect input from an employee's supervisor, from their colleagues, and from their subordinates. So all the people that they work with have input into how this employee is performing. They each give their feedback, and that's taken into consideration when developing their evaluation. The advantage to the system is that it creates stronger teamwork. So the employee is being held accountable to multiple stakeholders, and you also get multiple perspectives. So they know during the year that the people that they work with, their employees, their subordinates, are going to share their feedback, and that feedback is going to be valued. The disadvantages is that it can create a negative culture, especially if some of that feedback isn't positive, and might not always be accurate. So especially if you're asking employees to provide their feedback and they're not properly trained, it could be a biased opinion. The most common one that we see is the graphic rating scale. So typically when you use this system, you're rating employees on a scale of 3 to 5 gradations. So maybe it's 1 to 3, they meet expectations, don't meet expectations, or they're exceeding expectations. The advantages here are that it's easy to design, use, and understand. So it gives managers a very quick overview, and they can kind of go through and check the boxes of where this employee is falling. The disadvantages are that it tends to be a little bit too vague or lenient. So a lot of times, managers won't include specific examples when they're using this type of system. And then it becomes difficult when they're sitting down to have that conversation with the employee and explain to them why they're not meeting expectations or why they gave them that rating. And this could ultimately lead to inconsistent ratings. And then we also see behaviorally anchored rating scales used a lot. This is otherwise known to as bars. And when using the system, you're attempting to assess employee behavior rather than specific characteristics, which is more common in a graphic rating scale. So this appraisal tool generally contains a set of specific behaviors that represent different gradations of performance and are used as common reference points, which we call anchors. So developing this type of assessment is very time consuming, and it can be very expensive because it's based on conducting extensive job analysis, and it's usually specific to each individual job. The advantages, though, are that it provides a lot of clarity around what the expectations are and what good performance looks like. And you also end up with some strong data that's quantifiable, and you can cover a broad range of behaviors. So regardless of the type or the format of the selected method to review an employee's behavioral or work expectations, you need to make sure that there are clear definitions of each level of performance, and that whoever's doing the rating, the manager, is providing examples of the behaviors, of the skills, and of the measurements and other performance factors to help them with evaluating that employee. The other thing to take into consideration is what's going to work best for your management and your team members and your resources. So if you're considering implementing a BARS evaluation system, you want to look at what your resources are. How much time do you have? How much funding do you have? Who would conduct the job analysis? And what that investment looks like. If you're looking at a graphic rating scale system, this is the simpler system to design. So it's not as time consuming or as expensive, but it will require some training for managers on giving those specific examples, making sure they're not too vague or too lenient, and who is going to look over these performance evaluations to ensure that they're impactful. So we have another slide here. We'd like to hear from everyone. Which is your biggest challenge with conducting performance evaluations? So we can go ahead and use that Slido QR code, or you can go to the website. So is it that you don't have objective criteria in place? You don't have enough time? Maybe you don't have one at all? Or you're doing them annually. We know a lot of people are doing them annually. Is it hard to recall their performance from 11 months ago? So we're seeing a lot of people saying that it's not enough time. We are a little all over the map again, but mostly not enough time. And performance evaluations are very time consuming. So it does take time to put it in place, to write the evaluation, sit down, think about it, really consider that employee's behavior, performance throughout the past year. I think the key to remember here is when, we're in that time crunch, is one, obviously planning ahead, performance evaluations, feedback. It's all about planning and making sure that you're allocating yourself enough time, but also seeing it as an investment. So like Christine mentioned, think about how much time you're spending with employees who are underperforming versus your employees who are doing really well. Is that a valuable use of your time? Sitting down and making that investment into analyzing someone's performance, into having that conversation with them, it's an investment, similar to the way that training is. And you're giving back that time to the employee so that then they can take that feedback and ultimately improve. And hopefully you spend less time with them throughout the year, because now they have a clear path to improvement and to development. So once that evaluation is written, the next step is to conduct the performance review meeting. And this is where I see a lot of managers struggle, and mostly because there isn't enough training provided around having that conversation. So we've seen some times where a manager will sit down with an employee to go over that evaluation, and they simply hand them the piece of paper and say, this is your evaluation. Please read through it. Let me know if you have any questions. That's not an effective way to meet with them. So you do want to make sure that you're having a conversation with them and that you're prepared for that meeting. So being prepared and starting on time shows respect for the process and for that employee. So this is the employee's time to really have your undivided attention and discuss their performance and their goals. So you want to set the date and the time in advance and let the employee know that you will be discussing their performance. This way they have time to prepare their thoughts as well and their feedback. And going back to anyone who is a PI client with us, you do have behavioral reports for all of your employees, and you can kind of gauge which employees want to think about it a little bit more and need to know in advance when they will be having an important conversation like this. You also want to ensure that you're putting this on your calendar and you're not interrupted during that time period. This way you can really give the employee your full focus. You also want to make sure that you're creating a positive environment and you're helping the employee feel at ease. So you do want them to be in a mind frame where they feel comfortable and supported, and they'll show their feedback with you and they're comfortable asking questions. We also talk about focusing on the job and not the person. So when you're giving feedback, tie it back to the person's job and their responsibilities. You want to make sure that you're not confusing the person with their actions, because if you tend to be personal, it'll lead the recipient to shut down, and they'll be less likely to act on or learn from the points that you're sharing with them. And then giving clear and specific examples about the issues at hand. So again, be prepared. If you're going to share with someone that they're underperforming in a certain area, you want to have clear, specific examples of exactly when it happened. So if it's you're not responding to customers in a timely manner, okay, when did they not respond? Who was the customer? When did that happen? This way it really paints a picture for them and they can understand where they're falling short and where they need to improve. And then asking questions. So ask the employee to share their feedback. If you noticed that they're not doing something well, maybe ask them, how do you feel that you're doing in this area? And bring them around so that they can also see where they might need to improve, and if they might feel comfortable sharing where they'd like to grow and develop. And then at the end of the conversation, wrap it up. So summarize and review the key points of the discussion. Where are they looking to improve? Where are they looking to grow? What are the specific action steps that are going to be taken? What are their goals? And when will you touch base with them again on these items? Another area where we often see managers kind of drop the ball is on that follow-up. So I've seen it a lot where we set these goals on an annual basis. We're like, okay, great. This is where you're going to develop. This is what you're going to do. This is the training that you're going to take. And then it's not spoken about again. And then a year goes by and it's time to do performance evaluations. So you go in your files, you pull out their last evaluation to see how they did on their goals, and you realize that nothing was done. You had the conversation and you got so busy in other day-to-day items and priorities that there was little follow-up. And now you're back to that goal again. So following up is crucial. My suggestion is that when you have that conversation with them and you determine what that timeline is, right then and there, set up a date and a time that you're going to meet with them again. This way you're both holding each other accountable to that. So there are also several common issues or areas for improvement that we see quite often. So the first one is rater error. So this is when the manager is not either properly trained on how to evaluate employees, and a lot of times we see what's called lack of differentiation. And this occurs a lot when you're rating people on like a 1 to 3 scale. And oftentimes managers will just rate all of their subordinates right down the middle. And they're not identifying who are your top performers and who are your bottom performers. So it's important, again, back to that management training, that they feel comfortable and empowered in saying, you are a top performer. This is where you're doing really well. And then to their bottom performers, this is where you need to improve. We also see a lot of what's called recency effects. So especially with these annualized reviews, where managers are taking into consideration what happened in the last month. You know, it goes back to that saying, what have you done for me lately? So maybe this employee didn't have a great last month and now they got a poor review. But all the 11 months prior to that were fantastic. And vice versa. Maybe they slacked off for 11 months and then the last month they stepped it up. So really considering that entire evaluation period when you're completing that form and having that conversation. The other one that we see a lot is lack of preparedness. So managers will go into that conversation not prepared with talking points. They don't have specific examples, or they haven't really scheduled that time in advance. It's kind of just, oh my gosh, performance evaluations are due. I need to meet with you today at 3 o'clock. We have to get this done. And they're looking at it as more like checking a box, which in that case, it kind of loses the entire value of that performance evaluation. The manager is not getting much out of it. The employee is not getting much out of it. So if you're spending your time into doing something, you want to make sure that it's as impactful as possible. We also see managers and leaders confuse giving feedback with a performance appraisal. I kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but performance appraisals are a more formal document. Feedback is continuous, it's ongoing, it's in the moment, and the performance appraisal is what occurs at your set intervals. Something that I also see is when managers bring up new elements during a performance evaluation conversation. So during that conversation, they'll say to the employee, hey, you've been late 5 times over the past few months. And they never had this conversation with the employee. The appraisal conversation is not the time to bring up a new element. When you notice something that is an issue or an area that someone needs to improve, or even when they're doing something really well, that's feedback that you want to share with them in the moment. I recently had a manager come to me and say, look, I'm having a problem with this employee. He tends to call out on Mondays every other week. So I said, okay, have you talked to him about it? No, his performance evaluation is next month. I figured I would bring it up then. Okay, so now you're going to let that person go an entire month without having that conversation. And then they come into the performance evaluation conversation and they're surprised. They become defensive. It ends up not being a productive use of anyone's time. And then lastly, lack of follow through. And I touched on this previously, but really following through on what those goals are, what the plan for improvement is, and having those regular check-ins to ensure the employee is on a good path and that you're supporting them through that.
So we really appreciate your time and effort today and showing up and being present and participating in the polls. We really want to be here to support your success. So we have a special offer for anyone who's a director level above. We're offering you a complimentary session for you so that you can look at your behaviors and your team's behaviors and quickly identify what are the things that are holding you back. I'm sure you've often gotten feedback from people that you're checking in with them and they're like, yeah, I'm fine, everything's fine. But yet you don't feel the team is fully aligned and really on target and really performing well. So this session will be 60 minutes. It'll be on Zoom. We're going to ask you to invest a little bit of time with us up front in answering some questions and taking a predictive index survey. And then you should walk away from it feeling like you're much able and excited to set clear direction and kind of overcome those obstacles that are holding you and your team back from being successful. So if you would like to have this session, please shoot us an email to info, I-N-F-O, at Compass, C-O-M-P-A-S-S, W as in Walter, F as in Frank, S as in Sam.com. I'll put it in the chat. And let us know that you would like to sign up for this session. We will contact you, but this is quite a bit of work on our part. So for those of you that are interested, please reach out to us by 6 o'clock today, and we'll get back in touch with you within 48 hours. And I'm just putting the email.
I dropped it in there.
Oh, you did? Awesome. Okay. It's in the chat so that we can continue to help you be successful. I have to say, one of the things that I'm most proud of is our team and how we work together, and we leverage these tools every day. So we're no different than anybody else. We have our own challenges, our own struggles, but we constantly stay connected and mindful of who each of us is and what our strengths and blind spots are. I think we're going to ask you to give us a review, or if you have questions, we'll certainly take those. You can put them in the chat. But Marie, if you can put up the QR code, it really is helpful for us. If you can share your feedback about the sessions, you can scan the QR code and leave us a review on Trust Index. And our next webinar is October 18th at noon. So if you're on this webinar, you'll definitely get an invite. Again, feel free to share those invitations with anyone in your professional circle that you feel could benefit from investing 60 minutes with us. Does anybody have any questions, or they want to put their questions in the chat? Someone says the QR code is not working.
Okay. So we will send out an updated QR code with the information, but you could also go to Google directly or to our webpage, and you can leave us a review there as well.
I don't think anyone has any questions that I'm seeing in the chat. And we're at our 60 minutes of time. So thank you again. Thank you so much. You're one step closer to achieving the success that you want for you and your team. Have a great day and a great week.
Thank you, everyone.
Christine. Thank you, Marie.